Happy New Year and welcome to In Touch with Durham County. I'm Deborah Craig Ray, Assistant County Manager. I'm joined by my co-host, County Commission Chairman Michael Page.
Happy New Year, Deborah, and welcome back as well. I trust you and your family had a wonderful holiday season. As our regular viewers know, we use this TV show to interview our Durham County leaders, department heads, staff, and community partners to share important information about our program and services.
Well, we are delighted to welcome back to the show our Durham County Manager, Wendell Davis. We spoke with our new county manager last summer, just months after he began his tenure. Chairman Page, I think you will agree that he has been quite busy getting his arms around Durham County government these past few months.
You are absolutely correct, Deborah. He is the hardest working person in the county, and we are happy that we have gotten him back in the studio for this conversation about reshaping Durham County government.
Our county manager is joined by Deputy County Managers Marquita Welton and Lee Worsley. We will speak with them in our second segment about their work to support this realignment. Chairman Page, let's begin our conversation.
Absolutely. Welcome back, County Manager Davis. Thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Deborah, for hosting me today and my staff. I trust that you both had very happy holidays and are experiencing so far a prosperous new year.
Right. You've been at the helm now since April. Overall, how are you doing?
I think I'm doing reasonably well in light of the hours that we're putting in. I feel pretty good. Now, if you ask my wife, she may have a different perspective because she says that she never sees me, but nonetheless, I think things are going reasonably well.
Great, great. Since the summer, you've been working to revamp our organization. In particular, you have devoted considerable time to introducing both our commissioners and your leadership to a concept called managing for results. And in simple terms, tell us, what is managing for results?
Well, managing for results, Chairman Page, in a simple term, is basically four things. It's essentially looking at how we plan, how we budget, how we manage, and how we evaluate and learn, quite frankly, from the work that we do for the public.
Sure. What is your particular experience with managing for results?
Well, actually, I started working in a managing for results environment probably about 20 years ago, very early on in my career. And it was, I should say, in my formative years. And at that time, I was in Prince William County, Virginia. And interestingly enough, a model that we built back some 20 years ago is still standing today and proving to yield great results for the community.
So we know that managing for results is not a new concept, but why is it so few communities tend to embrace it?
Well, first of all, because it's difficult. It requires patience. You have to have a long-term view in respect to the objectives and the outcomes that you would like to achieve. Interestingly enough, my executive leadership team now, along with all of our department heads, we've been doing some work over the last few months, reading Jim Collins' work, Good to Great. And at the outset of that piece of work, one of the things that Jim Collins says is essentially this. And this is the opening chapter of the book. He says, good is the enemy of great. Good is the enemy of great. He said we don't have great schools because we have good schools. We don't have great glee clubs because we have good glee clubs. We don't have great corporations because we have good corporations. And so in the context of that, in respect to why many jurisdictions can't or don't choose to do this work, is because quite oftentimes we settle. But the truth is, doing this work, although it requires great rigor, has the potential for great returns.
Absolutely, absolutely. So how have you worked to introduce that concept to your department heads and to the commissioners? I think you began with a white paper.
Well, the white paper was part of the beginning phases of our Managing for Results model. When I came in mid-April, essentially one of the things that I promised the executive leadership team along with our department heads was come July 1, we would have a big kickoff. And the purpose of the kickoff was to look at evaluating how we go about the business of breathing life into our strategic plan. And as a result, that kickoff, we brought in all 27 department heads, the executive leadership staff, and about 80 or 90 other individuals in the organization. They were mid-level managers and others who had management responsibility for the organization. And during the course of that kickoff, we talked about just that notion of how we build ourselves a model that would be sustainable for the future, and at the same time give us an opportunity to to peer into the future and to make some deliberate efforts to recognize the community outcomes as expressed in the strategic plan.
Absolutely. I recall, working with that group of 100, I think we called them, and we had a wonderful consultant working with us, and I know that work was very intense.
Oh, it was. It was extremely intense, and one thing that I'm proud to say is that, anytime you're in a leadership role, obviously clarity is extremely and exceptionally important, which goes back to the point that you mentioned earlier regarding the white paper. I developed the white paper as a result of, my inability to be as clear as I needed to be for the staff. And I will say to you, Mr. Chairman and Deborah, those were some very frustrating days, and they were frustrating because of the fact that I felt like I was talking about managing for results, but it wasn't exactly sort of getting to the places that I needed to get in terms of organizational understanding. And so as a result of that work, as you pointed out earlier, I did develop a white paper for the express purposes of trying to be clearer about where we needed to go as an organization. And so in a nutshell, I think during the course of that process, one of the things that, we all came to a realization about was this. We had a great strategic plan. We had some great goal areas. We had some objectives and some goals that we wanted to build on, but we didn't necessarily have the engine in order to get us there. So what my staff now basically says is they think about it in this context. They look at the strategic plan as sort of the map, and they look at managing for results as the engine that we put in the strategic plan in order to get us to that desired destination.
Very good.
Following the first engagement, you had design labs and specific working groups building the model with the help of our consultant. Please detail that process for us.
Oh, yes, absolutely. So I talked about the July 1st kickoff, and once we had the kickoff with the staff to put the initial concept sort of in motion, we had the good fortune of working with Martha Marshall, who is actually an international consultant in this space of strategic planning and performance measurements. And Martha and I had obviously some history together way back some 20 years ago. So Martha was able to come in and aid and assist us in working through this process in terms of providing greater clarity. We did design labs, and the design labs was designed for the express purpose of trying to give us insight in respect to what our model needed to be. On the July 1 date, when we kicked off, one of the things that the executive leadership team promised the committee of 100 that we would come back with in the late August time frame was a model for Durham County. And I'm happy to report, Mr. Chairman, that we've developed that model. And we have a model and a timeline, and when you look at it, it's 2 pieces of paper. But the thing that makes me most proud is the fact that those 2 pieces of paper, given the rigor of the staff, it was comprised of about, if I had to guess, about 2,000 man hours, because that committee of 100 came together. They worked very rigorously through those design labs. And I need to take this opportunity to, quite frankly, acknowledge one of our staff people who was sort of the tip of the spear throughout this process, and that's Michael Davids, our strategic planning manager. Michael worked very closely with Martha Marshall to get all the design labs laid out, and to make sure that we had the right people in there. And it's been a very exhausting but productive process. One of the things that the consultant did in fact share with all of us the last time that she was here was we basically taken about a year's worth of work and we crammed it into 6 months. And so I feel really good about the staff we have, the talent that we have inside of our organization, and the potential that we have in respect to changing the dynamic in our community as it relates to getting to those desired outcomes that we say we desire in our strategic plan.
Yes. Why has it been critical to build our Durham County model and not just use someone else's?
Well, it's critical because this is Durham. You can find managing for results models across the country. I'd mentioned Prince William County, but Martha Marshall, the young lady who's working with us, she worked for several years with the ICMA consortium, going across the country doing just this work. It is best management practices. One of the reasons that we want to make sure that we build a model that is Durham is sort of twofold. First, it expresses who we are as a community, but more importantly, it creates the level of ownership and buy-in by the staff, because it's, at the end of the day, the staff who will have to go out and get the work done on the ground. It's the staff who will have to go out, build the strategic partnerships with other parties in our community, whether it's business, nonprofit, education, or otherwise, in order to make the work happen. And so if the staff doesn't believe in it, then obviously it's not going to go anyplace.
Okay. So we have built our model, so let's very quickly look at a couple of the elements. There are 4 elements, so let's very quickly talk about them.
Okay, very good. So when we talk about planning, planning is essentially, and before I start, Mr. Chairman and Deborah, one of the things I think is important to say is this. As we talk about the 4 elements of the model, it's important to realize that they are, in fact, interrelated, connected, and it is, in fact, a cyclical process. So when I talk about planning in terms of those things that we intend to achieve, one of the things that we have to do sort of on an ongoing basis is make sure that we refresh our strategic plan and that we keep it vital, that we continue to focus on the results that the community wants with more explicit strategies and more explicit partnerships. We want to emphasize a clear role for our county and make sure that we collaborate and coordinate with all of those critical parties in ways that are built around sharing and celebrating results. That means that in the planning arena also that we have to have more useful indicators of success and performance, and that, and given that, it means that we'll have to have surveys done, we'll have to gain insight and gauge our progress on some of the community indicators, and we will also, make sure that we do a good job in respect to providing clarity, doing reporting to the board, reporting to our community, and things of that nature in the planning space. So, performance data will be extremely important. Performance reports will be extremely important. And, of course, the analytical parts in respect to what we're actually accomplishing will be of utmost importance. And so in the planning space, that's the work that's going on. One of the things that I probably should have said to you at the outset is basically this. Those 4 quadrants, what we have during the course of designing that model is progress teams that are set up in each of those quadrants that are led by specific individuals within the management structure. And those progress teams will be responsible for primarily carrying out that work, delivering on the milestones, and going back and, of course, learning and evaluating, which will be a critical part of this. So I've talked to you about sort of the planning component. What I want to do now is to sort of shift gears a little bit and talk to you about sort of the management piece, and that's primarily, those important things that we want to, in fact, make happen. So it's, as I pointed out before, it's extremely important for us to work to build considerable capacity within our organization for the express purposes of doing performance measurements. But we also want to make sure that we reinforce accountability. We want to do things like create an opportunity and, of course, an environment that encourages innovation and, of course, employee empowerment. And when you create that kind of culture and that kind of environment, obviously it gives you an opportunity to get the best out of your employees because it affords them to sort of get outside of that box that we typically as organizations have a tendency to put people into, and to think deeper about problem solving and challenges that we have in our community. And so, on the management end, those are some of the things that we are trying to do. On the evaluation and learning piece, that's a critical piece. And what we're talking about there is those things that work, but also those things that we can, in fact, improve upon. So when we talk about evaluation and learning, reporting will be a critical part of that. And what we're talking about there is essentially management reporting. And that management reporting will offer us an opportunity for greater clarity. And if you got greater clarity about what you're doing, then obviously that positions you to have a greater impact on what you're doing. And we got to have an organizational culture that supports learning. And when you talk learning and evaluation, that's where all of that work, in fact, gets centered. And I know you're saying, well, this is some pretty detailed stuff. And it is, in fact. But as I said before, this kind of work requires great rigor. It requires discipline. And it requires having a long-term vision for where you want to go as an organization. And so we recognize that. The last part that I want to talk about is essentially the budgeting component, and that's basically the results that we, in fact, fund. And this is, in some respects, where the rubber meets the road. If you, for example, look at most organizations, just as a case in point, and I tell the staff this all the time, most organizations, particularly government organizations, we typically operate under what I call the squeaky wheel model, and I'm sure that all of us are very familiar with it and have heard it. But the thing that working under a squeaky wheel model does not afford us an opportunity to do is to make informed decisions. And so subsequently, we will oftentimes allocate dollars because a individual or a group of people came up and said that, we need this, we should have this. And oftentimes, decision-making that way is anecdotal as opposed to it being deliberate based on data. And so when you start to thinking about, some of the practices that you have to consider when you're looking at performance-based investment, you basically have to look at your desired outcomes, and you have to look at program performance and, of course, effectiveness. And in so doing, in order to make performance-based investments, you will find that occasionally you have activities within your organization that are high-performing and that are lowly aligned as it relates to your organizational outcomes. And where you have those sort of arrangements, then that's an opportunity to look at things like reduced investment or some spinoff. If you have things that are low-performing, just as an example, and that are lowly aligned in respect to your outcomes, then that's an opportunity that you have to give some critical consideration to in respect to whether or not you should be doing it at all. So that could be a resource opportunity to eliminate, an opportunity for additional resources, and you should potentially look at eliminating those things. And then, of course, there are those things that are low performing but have high alignment as it relates to your organizational objectives. And when you look at that quadrant, essentially of the module, you basically want to redesign and reevaluate those things. At the end of the day, when you talk about performance-based investment, what you want to be investing in is those things that are high-performing and that have high alignment and that are aimed directly at giving you the desired results that we say we desire in terms of our overall community outcomes.
Great. Well, in addition to the key elements, I understand there are values at the foundation of the model. Can you share those with us as well?
Absolutely. And those values, quite frankly, at the foundation of the model are the things that we have always expressed that were important to us. Things like excellence in customer service, things like high levels of collaboration, and things of that nature. When we put our badges on each day and walk in our county building, if you flip that badge over, you'll see that there's a set of values on that badge. In order to sort of get there in understanding how our model came about, when we were working with Martha Marshall, one of the things we went through was sort of a SWOT analysis. And so during the course of that work, we asked ourselves, what are the things that we stand for? What are those things that we are really, really good at? And as a part of that, that became, of course, the foundation for the model that we have built for Durham County going forward.
So at the end of the day, we are moving into a new way to doing business and creating a more responsive and effective government for our community. Is that about right, Mr. Manager?
Mr. Chairman, I'll be the first to say that that is absolutely the aim. But the one thing that I would just like to caution our community about is that, again, this work requires rigor, and it will not happen overnight. But I can assure you that over the long haul, if we have the stick-to-itness, this will pay great dividends for our community.
All right. Well, this has been very great. We've gotten a great start on managing for results, and we appreciate the high-level explanation. And so, as you say, we are all working throughout the organization, putting the rubber and the road together. And so we thank you so much for coming, and we're going to look forward to hearing more information about managing for results. And we're going to take a brief break, and when we come back, we're going to hear from our deputy county managers, Lee Worsley and Marquita Welton. Stay with us. Today we're talking about managing for results. Our guests this afternoon are Lee Worsley, Deputy County Manager, and Marquita Welton, Deputy County Manager. Chairman Page, let's continue our conversation.
Absolutely. Lee, tell us, EMS is a service most can relate to. And can you use the EMS and walk us through the impact of managing results in service delivery?
Sure, I'd be happy to, Mr. Chairman. During the last year, we've had some very productive conversations about EMS and the services and the direction we want that to go in the next several years. As we walked through our conversation, we touched on each of the four managing for results quadrants. First, we thought strategically about the service. We talked a great deal about what it would take to achieve the response times that the community expects and what we could do to accomplish that strategy. Secondly, we thought about the budgetary impacts on that strategy. What would it cost to achieve the response time that the community wants? And based on all of the other competing priorities, what would we recommend to the Board of Commissioners regarding the funding of the strategy? Third, we started to put together an operational or a management plan to make sure that progress was being made towards the goals expressed during that strategic conversation. We began heavily analyzing data such as response times, turnaround times at the hospitals for paramedics, vehicle maintenance, and clinical measures. Finally, we wanted to make sure that we could analyze, learn, and evaluate and hold people accountable for the results that we had identified during that first strategic discussion at the very beginning of the process. And so as a result, we studied metrics in real time, made adjustments as needed, and used what we learned to begin making adjustments and plans for what EMS would look like both this year and into the future.
Marquita, can you do a similar explanation for public health, one of the departments that you oversee in this context?
Absolutely. Public health, as you know, does a lot in our community. Durham County is a leader not only in recognizing that social factors such as education and poverty affect health and have a tremendous impact on the health determinant outcomes, but we are taking these issues very seriously, and in fact, public health has incorporated them into the public health strategic plan as issues that we need to deal with, so both poverty and education. To that end, as you know, our public health department partners with or is a member, a key member, leader really, of the Partnership for a Healthy Durham. And through that partnership, we have, as I said, included poverty and education as key initiatives to work on. So we're proud of our successes in naming those issues as important to the strategic plan. Durham County supports the public schools, as you know, is a huge part of our budget, and so education rises to the top for us, not only in making sure that we have kids trained to go through the pipeline, as we're always talking about preparing kids for jobs, but in order to do that, we need to make sure that our kids are healthy. And so what we've done in public health is and let me back up and say what you've done as commissioners. You funded positions for public health to have nurses in our schools. And so through those positions, we're able to provide health education, sex education. We have a tooth fairy, we have nutritional services, and all of those things that come with public health are being provided right in the public schools. We provide a wellness center in one of our high schools. So I don't know if I mentioned already the tooth fairy, but the tooth fairy was able to service in conjunction with the nurses and for sex education, for nutrition, for all of those things that we do in the public schools. We service 2,989 children just in the 2011 and 2012 school year. So by relieving some of the pressures that these children experience, not having access to be able to go on their own, they can get it in school. We certainly have elevated in our strategic plan public health, poverty, education, as those things that are important for us to fund.
So bottom line, this Managing for Results transition has a timeline. Please discuss how we will begin with a handful of departments in the first year. Lee, perhaps you want to write that.
So, we know any initiative, it's really good to start small, to learn from what we do well and what we may not do so well. So we're going to start with 6 pilot departments in the first year to develop measures that are linked to departmental programs. Over time, we'll integrate this with program-based budgeting, and we will gradually begin developing the foundation through the departmental pilots for implementation across the organization over the next several years.
Well, I must say this Managing for Results has been really exciting to work on, and a lot of us are looking forward to going across the community and just kind of talking to our residents about what this means and how this will allow us to do our services better for them. Are you excited about that, Marquita?
Absolutely.
All right. Well, I think people will look for the manager, and they will look for the two of you, and probably the commissioners as well as we go forward, just talking about the concept of managing for results.
Absolutely.
Well, at the end of the show, we're going to put up some information about how people can get more information about managing for results.
Great.
Yeah. Well, we'd like to thank you both so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Mr. Chairman, we've had an exciting show.
Another wonderful show. Off to a good year.
I think so.
Thank you, Deborah, and I can't wait to see what we tackle next time.
Well, I think we're pretty busy, so we'll probably come up with something great. Thank you all for joining us today, and have a great day. Don't forget to follow Durham County Government on Facebook and Twitter.